Every government on Earth knows that Iran is building long-range missiles. That is not a secret. What is a secret, what has always been a secret, is who exactly is building them. Not the program, the people. Because programs can be sanctioned, facilities can be bombed, centrifuges can be sabotaged. But the three men who understood, at a level no one else in the country did, how to make a missile turn at the last second and hit a target the size of a building from 800 kilometers away, those three men were not in any public record. They were not on any Western watch list. They were not known to exist until one bureaucratic mistake, made on a Tuesday afternoon in Tehran, changed everything. In intelligence work, the most dangerous moment is not the strike. It is the moment 3 months before the strike, when someone in a field cell realizes that the information they have been relying on for 2 years may not mean what they thought it meant. There is an officer, we will call him Eitan, who had that realization at 11:43 p.m. on a Wednesday in a rented apartment in a city that will not be named, staring at a surveillance log that had been filed, reviewed, approved, and acted upon by 6 people before it reached him. He was the 7th. And he was the first one to notice that for 11 days out of 72, the man they had been tracking had not been behaving irregularly. Someone else had been living in his apartment. Nobody had asked who. Iran does not publish the names of the people who build its weapons. This is not a matter of classification in the traditional sense. It is something more structural than that. Scientists inside Iran's advanced missile program are not merely kept secret. They are institutionally erased. Their academic affiliations are listed under civilian research bodies with names that suggest nothing. Their procurement requests are routed through administrative layers designed to make the paper trail dissolve before it reaches anyone with the context to read it. For over a decade, Western intelligence agencies, including Mossad, had been constructing partial maps of the program's human architecture. Not full profiles, fragments, a name that appeared once in an intercepted logistics chain, a photograph matched to an old university credential, a phone number that surfaced in 2 separate communications 6 months apart and then went permanently silent. The 3 men at the center of this operation did not appear in those fragments by name. They appeared by role. The trajectory specialist, the guidance lead, the propulsion engineer, 3 titles, no faces, no addresses, until 2019 when Iran's missile program underwent an internal administrative restructuring. Routine on paper, but in the process of reassigning personnel, a batch of internal communications was briefly routed through a channel that was not as hardened as the ones normally used for this level of correspondence. The window lasted 11 days. SIGINT teams captured fragments, not clean intercepts, not a full record, but enough cross-references to begin connecting the roles to real human beings. It took 14 more months to turn those fragments into names. And the confirmation, the piece of intelligence that finally locked identity to role, did not come from a satellite. It did not come from a cyber operation. It came from a man who had been working inside the program and had decided, for reasons that were entirely his own, that he was done. His name for this account is Davar. He was not a Mossad recruitment. He was not approached, cultivated, or flipped through the standard channels. He was an Iranian aerospace engineer who had spent 8 years working in a civilian research institute before being transferred, without his consent, to a facility he had not been cleared for and had not been briefed on. He understood quickly what he was working on. He understood within weeks what his work would eventually be used for. He made contact through a dead drop channel in Istanbul in early 2021. He did not come with demands. He came with a specific request, one that has never been publicly confirmed, and in exchange he offered something precise. He offered 3 names. He also offered, without fully understanding what he was providing, something more operationally valuable than the names themselves. He offered their schedules. 4 months of documented patterns, routes, times, locations. The kind of data that a surveillance cell would normally take 18 months to build from scratch, handed over in a single exchange, in a city neither side officially acknowledged visiting. Mossad's analysts spent 6 weeks stress testing what Davar had provided. Not because they doubted him, because in intelligence work, information that arrives too cleanly is often the information that has been prepared for you. The data survived every check they ran. What it didn't survive, what no one pushed hard enough on, was the 11-day gap. Eitan had been assigned to the operation 8 months before the strike. He was not the operations architect. He was its executor on the ground. The officer responsible for translating a plan built from satellite imagery, SIGINT fragments, and Devar's schedules into something that could actually function inside a city where his team could not openly operate, could not call for backup, and could not afford a single procedural error that would require explanation. He had done this before. 3 prior operations in the region, all closed, all, in the official record, successful. What he brought to this one that he had not fully brought to the others was a habit he had developed after the second operation went sideways in a way that nobody had anticipated. A habit of rereading surveillance logs not for what they confirmed, but for what they skipped. Gaps, in his experience, were never random. Gaps meant something had changed and nobody had updated the model. He found the 11-day gap on his 4th pass through the propulsion engineer's file. 72 days of observation. 61 of them consistent. 11 of them flagged in the log as schedule variation, possible security response, and then marked resolved without further annotation. Marked resolved. By whom? Based on what? He submitted a query up the chain requesting the resolution basis. The response came back in 48 hours. It said, assessed as routine. Confidence level, moderate, moderate. In intelligence operations, the word moderate carries a specific weight. It does not mean probably fine. It means we do not have enough information to say it is fine, and we do not have enough information to say it is not. And we have made a judgment call that the operation should proceed as planned. Eitan wrote a 3-paragraph response to that assessment. He noted the gap. He noted the absence of explanation for what had caused the schedule variation. He noted that the propulsion engineer, of the 3 targets, was the one who had most visibly adjusted his behavior following the 2020 Fakhrizadet assassination, and that a man who had already demonstrated a capacity for adaptive security behavior was precisely the kind of target whose irregular patterns should not be filed under routine without a clear basis. He sent the 3 paragraphs. He waited. 12 days later, the operation was accelerated. Not because his concern had been resolved, because something else had happened, something that removed the option of waiting. Iran had conducted a test, internal, unpublicized, a missile with a terminal phase guidance profile that Mossad's technical analysts had not seen before. Not an incremental improvement on a known system, but a qualitative shift. More precise, more maneuverable in the final seconds of flight, and carrying the signature of something that was no longer experimental. It was ready. The timeline that had allowed for a methodical, low-exposure approach, the kind of approach that would have given Eitan the time to resolve his 11-day question, was gone. The decision came down from a level above the operational team. The operation would proceed in the next available window. Eitan's unresolved query was not closed. It was simply no longer the priority. He packed his equipment that night in the rented apartment, looked at the surveillance log one more time, and made a note in his personal operational record, not the official one, the personal one he kept in a cipher only he used. The note read, 11 days, unknown occupant, unresolved. Then he closed the file and began preparing for a mission he had not yet been told he was not fully ready for. Somewhere in Tehran, in an apartment whose coordinates had been locked into a targeting system weeks earlier, a light was on at an hour when the surveillance log said no light should be on. Nobody was watching that night. The operation as designed was not elegant. Elegance in intelligence work is a retrospective quality, something analysts assign to operations that worked. In planning, the same operation looks like a series of compromises made under time pressure, with incomplete information, by people who are trying to account for variables they cannot fully see. This operation had 3 targets, 3 separate teams, 3 separate methods, and 1 coordinated window, a 6-hour period during which all 3 strikes had to be completed before the first one triggered the security lockdown that would make the remaining 2 impossible. The window had been identified months earlier, a specific 72-hour period when Iran's IRGC rapid response coordination would be operating in a degraded configuration, a technical vulnerability in their command and communication architecture that had been quietly protected as a closely held intelligence asset for over a year. It had never been used. It had been saved for something that mattered enough. This was that something. Team 1 was assigned to the trajectory specialist. Their method was remote, a vehicle-mounted precision system, pre-positioned 2 days before the strike, triggered from a location 3 kilometers away. The team would not be present at the moment of execution. It was the cleanest of the 3 assignments, and it had been given to the most experienced cell. Team 2 was assigned to the guidance lead. Their approach was more direct. 2 operatives, close proximity, a method that required physical presence in the target's immediate environment for a window of less than 4 minutes. Higher risk, faster execution, and a harder exfiltration route because of the neighborhood's layout and the presence of a police checkpoint that had been installed 6 months earlier and had not appeared on any prior surveillance map. Nobody had flagged the checkpoint as a planning factor until Team 2's lead operative walked the route himself and sent back a single-line report, revised extraction. Will require judgment call on timing. Judgment call on timing. In planning language, that phrase means, we have identified a problem we cannot fully solve in advance, and we are asking you to trust the person on the ground to make the right decision in real time. Operations built on judgment calls tend to go 2 ways. Team 3 was Eitan's team. His assignment was the propulsion engineer, the most protected of the 3 targets, the one who had adapted his behavior most visibly since 2020, the one whose 11-day surveillance gap had not been explained. His method relied on overhead precision, a system guided by pre-confirmed coordinates triggered remotely with a targeting envelope calibrated to the residential structure where the propulsion engineer had been observed consistently for 61 of 72 surveillance days. The system was accurate to a margin that Eitan trusted completely. What he did not trust, what he had put in writing and been told, was assessed as moderate confidence. Was the occupancy model those coordinates had been built on? He had raised this. He had been heard. He had been told to proceed. So he prepared. He ran his team through the extraction sequence 4 times in the week before execution. He confirmed communication protocols with the central coordination cell. He reviewed the abort criteria, the specific conditions under which the targeting system was programmed to send an abort query rather than execute automatically. One of those criteria was secondary occupancy presence outside predicted parameters. He noted it, filed it mentally, moved on. What he did not know, what none of the 3 teams knew by design, was that the central coordination cell had quietly revised the abort threshold 2 weeks before the operation, raising it slightly to reduce the probability of last-second aborts in complex urban environments. The revision was documented. It had been approved at a level above the operational team. It had not been communicated to the field. 48 hours before the operation window opened, Eitan received a piece of information that should have been routine: a final surveillance confirmation, a same-day observation of the propulsion engineer entering his residential building at his standard time, alone, without variation from the established pattern. Confirmation received. Target confirmed at location. Occupancy model consistent. Eitan read the report twice. He noted what it said. He also noted what it didn't say. The confirmation covered the entry point. It covered the time. It confirmed the target's presence. It said nothing about who else was inside. He submitted one more query, his third, requesting a same-day interior occupancy confirmation. Not a visual. Anything. A thermal read, a communication signature, anything that would give him a secondary data point on the building's occupancy in the hours before execution. The response came back 7 hours later. Interior confirmation not available within current operational constraints. Proceed on existing model. Existing model, moderate confidence. Eitan looked at the response for a long time. Then he authorized his team to move to their pre-execution positions. The operation's first hours ran exactly as planned. At 4:52 a.m. local time, Team 1 executed against the trajectory specialist. The system functioned precisely. The confirmation signal came back clean within 90 seconds. First target down. At 5:06 a.m., Team 2 reported they were in position. The checkpoint timing had been resolved by their lead operative with a decision that was not in the plan but was, by all subsequent assessments, correct. They executed at 5:09 a.m. Second confirmation. Clean. Eitan received both the signals in sequence, acknowledged them, and gave his team the final authorization. At 5:11 a.m., his system initiated its targeting sequence. 4 seconds later, not the confirmation signal, the abort query. The abort query stopped everything. Not because it was unexpected in the abstract, Eitan had reviewed the abort criteria. He knew what conditions triggered it, but in the specific operational context of 5:11 a.m., with 2 targets already confirmed and a 6-hour window that had already been running for 19 minutes, an abort query did not mean stop and reassess. It meant something at the target location does not match the model. He had 4 seconds to respond. In 4 seconds, you do not run an analysis, you do not consult, you do not review your prior concerns about 11-day surveillance gaps and moderate confidence assessments and interior occupancy confirmations that were never provided. You make a decision with whatever is already in your head. What was already in Eitan's head was the same thing that had been there for the past 3 months. The judgment, informed by experience and not by data, that the secondary presence flagged by the aborted query was probably a late arrival. A visitor. Someone on the outer edge of the lethal radius who had come after the final surveillance window closed. Probably. He authorized continuation with a modified parameter, a narrowed targeting envelope that reduced the blast radius by 30%. His reasoning was sound, given what he knew. His reasoning was based on an assumption he had never been able to verify. Here is what the 11-day gap actually was. It was not schedule variation. It was not an adaptive security response. It was not a pattern break triggered by the propulsion engineer's own security awareness. The engineer's niece, a 26-year-old graduate student in materials engineering at a Tehran university, had been staying in his apartment while her student housing underwent renovation. She had arrived on a Thursday evening. She had brought 2 bags and a stack of research papers. She had, in the surveillance logs, briefly altered the building's occupancy profile in ways that the field team had noticed and then, incorrectly, attributed to the target himself. She was not connected to any weapons program. She was not on any list. She had no operational relevance to anything Mossad was trying to accomplish. She was simply there, in an apartment whose coordinates had been locked into a targeting system weeks before she arrived, because her university dormitory had a water leak and her uncle had an empty room. That is the 11-day gap, not a threat, not a security pattern. A 26-year-old woman with a stack of research papers and no idea that the building she was sleeping in had already been selected. Eitan did not know this when he authorized continuation. He could not have known it, given the intelligence available to him. The surveillance confirmation had covered the entry point. The interior occupancy query had gone unanswered. The abort threshold had been revised upward without his knowledge. Every decision he made was defensible within the operational framework he had been given. And yet, and this is the part that the official record captures only in bureaucratic language, the narrowed targeting envelope he authorized in those 4 seconds was built on a probability estimate, not a confirmed assessment. He had assumed the secondary presence was outside the lethal radius. He had assumed it because he needed to, because the alternative, a fully aborted third strike, with 2 targets already confirmed and the 6-hour window still running, was an outcome that the operation's logic, its momentum, its institutional weight, made almost impossible to choose. The abort query had asked a question. Eitan had answered it with the best information he had. The system executed at 5:11 a.m. The propulsion engineer died 30 seconds later. And somewhere in the post-execution assessment that would not be completed for another 4 hours, a notation was added to the file, a single line, in the category marked secondary presence, that would be classified at a level no one on the operational team would ever be cleared to review. The question of who else was in that apartment would not be answered until long after the operation was declared a success, and by then, nobody with the authority to act on that answer was still assigned to the case. The night before the operation, Eitan did not sleep. This was not unusual for him. He had learned, over years of this kind of work, that the body's refusal to rest before an execution window was not anxiety. It was a form of preparation. The mind running and rerunning variables that the official plan could not fully account for. He lay on the narrow mattress in the safe apartment and stared at the ceiling and thought about the 11 days. Not obsessively, professionally. The way a surgeon thinks about a complication they have noted in a patient's file but have not been able to fully diagnose before the scheduled procedure. It was there. It was real. It had not been resolved. He made a decision in the dark in the hour before his team began their pre-execution sequence. If his targeting system sent an abort query, he would not treat it as a formality. He would treat it as the answer to the question he had never been able to get answered through official channels. He committed to that. He believed it when he made it. At 3:40 a.m., the 3 teams checked in through burst communication. All confirmed. All in position or moving toward position. The Central Coordination Cell confirmed that the IRGC degraded configuration window was active and holding. No anomalies in the broader surveillance picture. No indication that any of the 3 targets had altered their overnight patterns. Everything looked clean. This was the first problem. In Aitan's experience, operations that look completely clean at 3:40 a.m. do not stay that way. Something always surfaces. A variable the planning hadn't weighted, a coincidence the model hadn't predicted, a human decision made by someone on the ground whose logic was sound, but whose information was incomplete. The question was never whether something would surface. It was when, and whether the people on the ground would have enough time to adapt. At 3:58 a.m., something surfaced. Team 2, assigned to the guidance lead, reported a complication. Not at the target location, at the extraction route. The police checkpoint that Team 2's lead operative had identified during his personal reconnaissance, the one that had required a revised extraction plan and a judgment call on timing, had been reinforced overnight. Not significantly, one additional officer, a vehicle that hadn't been there the prior evening, a pattern of activity that suggested a shift change had happened 2 hours earlier than expected. It was not a crisis, but it compressed Team 2's post-execution extraction window from 9 minutes to approximately 5. Team 2's lead sent a single-line request to the coordination cell, requesting delay authorization of 15 minutes on execution timing. The coordination cell denied it. Denying a timing delay when 2 of 3 teams are already in motion is the kind of decision that looks correct from a coordination perspective and looks reckless from a field perspective. The coordination cell was managing 3 simultaneous operations across a city where any communication anomaly could trigger a security response. A 15-minute delay for one team created a 15-minute vulnerability in the synchronization of all 3. The denial was correct, operationally. It was also the decision that put Team 2's lead operative in a position where, 47 minutes later, he would have to move through an exit route with an additional officer and a vehicle he hadn't planned for, in a time frame that left him no margin for hesitation. He acknowledged the denial. He adjusted. He did not report the adjustment because there was no time. At 4:31 a.m., the coordination cell transmitted the final green signal. Execution window open. All 3 teams acknowledged, and then, for 12 minutes, nothing happened, not because anyone had paused, not because there was a complication, but because the operation's first execution, Team 1, against the trajectory specialist required the target to be in his vehicle. And the trajectory specialist, who had entered his residential building at his standard time the previous evening, had not yet emerged. The surveillance was watching his building's entrance. At 4:41 a.m., he had still not appeared. At 4:44 a.m., the Central Coordination Cell sent a query to Team 1, confirm visual. Team 1 responded, no visual, entrance clear, no movement. The trajectory specialist was late. He was never late. Aitan, receiving the coordination cell's updates in real time, felt the operation's first genuine fracture point. A target who is late is a target who may not be following the pattern the surveillance log predicted. A target who is not following the pattern may have been warned. A target who has been warned does not emerge at all, or emerges differently, with support, in a configuration that the field team is not positioned to handle. The coordination cell ran the calculus silently and then transmitted to all 3 teams, holding. Maintain position, do not advance. They waited. At 4:51 a.m., 19 minutes after the window opened, 11 minutes into the hold, the trajectory specialist walked out of his building. He was not late because he had been warned. He was late because, as subsequent intelligence reconstruction established, he had gone back inside to retrieve something he had forgotten. A trivial reason, a human reason, the kind of reason that has no place in a surveillance model, and yet occurs with a regularity that every field operative understands intellectually and dreads practically. He walked to his vehicle. He moved with the unhurried pace of a man who has made this same walk thousands of times. He did not look around. He did not hesitate. Team 1 executed at 4:52 a.m., first confirmation clean. The operation was back on schedule. This is the false release moment. After 19 minutes of a hold that had no clean resolution, a target who had disappeared from the surveillance picture for reasons unknown, his emergence and the clean execution felt like the operation correcting itself, like the tension that had built during those 19 minutes had been discharged. It had not been discharged, it had simply moved. Because in those 19 minutes of holding, Team 2's lead operative had been stationary in a position that was survivable for a planned window of 40 minutes. The delay had burned 19 of them before the first execution even occurred. He had 21 minutes left before his position became untenable. His execution was 9 minutes away. At 5:06 a.m., Team 2 confirmed position and requested execution authorization. The coordination cell granted it. At 5:09 a.m., Team 2 executed. The second confirmation came back 3 minutes and 40 seconds later, clean but slower than planned. The checkpoint had cost them time on the back end. Their lead operative was now moving through an extraction route with a window that had shrunk from 5 minutes to something closer to 2. The coordination cell tracked it. Nobody said anything about it on the communication channel because saying something about it served no operational purpose. The field operative either made it or he didn't, and the people listening from a coordination cell 3 kilometers away could not help him. He made it, by a margin that in any written account would be described as acceptable. In the moment, it was not what acceptable feels like. At 5:10 a.m., I-10 gave his team the final pre-execution check. System armed, coordinates locked, targeting envelope calibrated to the pre-confirmed residential structure. Abort criteria loaded. His team confirmed ready. He authorized initiation at 5:11 a.m. The system began its targeting sequence. I-10 watched the feed. For 3 seconds, the sequence ran exactly as it was supposed to. On the 4th second, the abort query appeared. He had told himself the night before, lying on the narrow mattress, that he would treat the abort query seriously. He had meant it. What he had not accounted for, what no amount of prior commitment can fully account for, was the specific weight of that moment. 2 targets already confirmed. The 6-hour window 19 minutes deep, a coordination cell monitoring all 3 channels simultaneously, 2 teams already in extraction, and a 3rd strike undelivered, with an abort query on the screen and 4 seconds to respond. The abort query's trigger condition was secondary occupancy presence outside predicted parameters. I-10 read it, and in the space of 4 seconds, his mind ran the following sequence, not as a conscious deliberation, but as the kind of rapid pattern matching that years of operational experience produce automatically. Secondary presence. Unknown. The engineer had been alone in the surveillance confirmations. The final report had confirmed entry, alone, at standard time. Secondary presence outside predicted parameters meant someone had arrived after the last observation window. Arrival after observation window. Not a security response. A security response would have been multiple presences, vehicles, a change in the building's external activity. This was one secondary presence. One person, a visitor, a late arrival, someone on the outer edge of the targeting envelope. He made the call. Modified parameter. Narrowed targeting envelope. 30% radius reduction. He told himself the secondary presence was outside the lethal radius. He told himself this because everything he knew, every pattern he had seen, every prior operation he had run pointed toward that conclusion. He was operating on an assumption built from 61 days of correct data. He was not operating on the 11 days he had never been able to explain. The system executed at 5:11 a.m. The propulsion engineer died. And for 4 minutes, the 4 minutes it took for the confirmation signal to come back and for A-10 to transmit the all clear to the coordination cell, the operation looked exactly like what it had been designed to look like. A success. Complete. Clean. All 3 targets confirmed within a 19-minute window. The coordination cell logged it as such. A-10 logged it as such. He did not yet know about the light that had been on in the apartment at an hour the surveillance log said no light should be on. He would not know for another 4 hours. And by then, the operation would already be closed. The coordination cell declared the operation complete at 5:31 a.m. All 3 confirmation signals received. All 3 field teams in extraction. The IRGC degraded configuration window still holding. No anomalies in the broader surveillance picture. No indication that any Iranian security response had been triggered ahead of the expected timeline. By every metric the operational framework had established, this was a textbook execution. The after-action log would later note, all objectives achieved within primary window. No assets compromised. No operational security breaches identified. A-10 read the log 4 hours later, in a different city, in a different safe apartment, with a cup of tea he had made and not drunk. He had received, in the interim, a secondary report. Not from the coordination cell. From an analytical unit that had been running parallel surveillance on the target locations in the hours following the strikes, standard post-execution monitoring, looking for indicators of security response, asset exposure, or intelligence leakage. The report contained one line that did not belong in a standard post-execution monitoring summary. It noted a secondary casualty at the third target location, non-combatant, female. Age estimated mid-20s. One line, no name, no further detail. Filed under a category that, in the operational taxonomy, meant, noted, classified, not operationally relevant to mission assessment. Aiton read the line. He did not read it as a bureaucratic notation. He read it as the answer to the question he had been asking for 3 months. The 11-day gap, the schedule variation, the interior occupancy query that had come back unanswered, the modified targeting envelope he had authorized in 4 seconds on the basis of an assumption he could not verify. The answer had been there the entire time. Nobody had looked hard enough to find it. He had looked harder than anyone else on the operational team, and he had still not looked hard enough. He put the report down. He did not file a response. He did not submit a query. He did not flag the notation for review. Because he understood with a precision that required no analysis that flagging it would not change what had already happened. It would only begin a process, formal, institutional, slow, that would eventually produce a classified document that no one with the authority to act on its contents would ever be cleared to read. He picked up his personal operational record, the one in the cipher only he used. He added 3 words beneath the entry he had made the night before. He did not write what those 3 words were in any account that has been made available. 7 weeks after the operation, the intelligence community's assessment of the strike's impact on Iran's missile program began to diverge from its initial projections. The early assessment had been confident. 3 key scientists eliminated. The program's most advanced guidance and propulsion work disrupted at a critical development stage. Institutional knowledge, the kind that cannot be replaced by a new hire or rebuilt from documentation, removed from the program entirely. That assessment was accurate as far as it went. It did not go far enough. What the early assessment had not fully weighted was the second-order response, not Iran's military response that had been anticipated and managed. The second-order response inside the missile program itself. The deaths did not slow the program. They restructured it. Within 3 weeks of the strikes, Iran's aerospace division had initiated an internal security reorganization that, by the assessment of 3 separate intelligence services operating independently, produced a compartmentalization architecture more resistant to penetration than anything the program had operated under before. Scientists were moved, not to new facilities, to new identities within the existing institutional structure. Programs were split along lines that made the organizational map, which Mossad had spent years constructing, functionally obsolete overnight. The academic front organizations that had been used to mask personnel affiliations, at the ones whose patterns Mossad's analysts had learned to read over years of patient surveillance, were dissolved, rebuilt, renamed, rewired through new administrative layers that had no connection to the old ones. Everything Mossad had mapped was still technically accurate. It was accurate about a structure that no longer existed. Davar went silent 6 weeks after the operation. Not captured, not killed. There was no intelligence indicator of either. He simply stopped responding to the dead drop channel. The Istanbul contact point received one final message, transmitted through the same protocol Davar had used since 2021. The message was short. Its precise content has not been confirmed in any public record. The officer who received it described it, in a single background comment made years later, as a communication that told them they had created a new problem without understanding what they were solving. The nature of that new problem was not specified. It did not need to be. The program Iran had been running before the strikes had been, at minimum, mappable, penetrable through the right assets, under the right conditions, with the right time and patience. Davar had been one proof of that. After the strikes, the program's human architecture had been rebuilt specifically around the assumption that it had already been penetrated, which meant every existing access point, every cultivated relationship, every partially developed asset inside the program was now operating inside a structure that had been designed, from the ground up, to identify and eliminate exactly those access points. The operation had succeeded at removing 3 individuals. In doing so, it had made the removal of any future individuals significantly more difficult. This is not a paradox, it is a pattern. It has a name inside intelligence communities, though that name is not used in public assessments. The notation about the secondary casualty at the third target location was classified at a level that meant it would not be reviewed for 25 years. This was not a cover-up. It was a classification decision made within existing protocols by people who were following established procedures for handling collateral presence incidents in denied area operations. The procedures existed. They had been designed specifically to manage these situations. They produced a process that was, by its own internal standards, correct. What the process did not produce was accountability in any form that the word normally implies. Eitan was reassigned 6 months after the operation. Not to a lesser posting, to a different regional desk, a lateral move that his colleagues understood without being told was connected to the third strike without being officially connected to anything. He was not disciplined, he was not praised, he was moved. The operation was closed as successful. The modified targeting parameter he had authorized, the decision made in 4 seconds on the basis of an assumption he had flagged 3 months earlier as unverified, was noted in the official record as within operational guidelines, which it was. The secondary casualty notation remained exactly where it had been filed. Under noted, classified, not operationally relevant to mission assessment, Iran inducted more engineers into classified military research programs in the 3 years following this operation than at any prior point in its modern history. That is not a coincidence. It is a direct institutional response to the demonstrated vulnerability of concentrating critical knowledge in identifiable individuals. The program learned what Mossad needed it not to learn, that its scientists could be found, that its schedules could be mapped, that its administrative errors could be read, and it adapted. The guidance systems those new engineers are currently developing, built under a compartmentalization architecture that has, by multiple external assessments, reduced Western intelligence visibility into the program to its lowest point in 15 years, carry refinements that the 3 scientists who died may or may not have contributed to in their final months. Nobody outside the program knows. That is the point. The operation did not end Iran's missile ambitions. It did not dismantle the program. It did not resolve the threat that had made the acceleration of the timeline feel necessary in the first place. What it did was remove 3 people, harden the institution around their absence, and produce 1 secondary casualty whose name appears in no public record, whose connection to anything geopolitical was non-existent, and whose presence in a targeted apartment was the direct result of a question that was asked 3 months before the strike, answered with moderate confidence and never resolved. Eitan still works in the intelligence community. He does not speak publicly about this operation. The personal operational record he kept, the one in the cipher only he used, has never been referenced in any official account. The 3 words he added after reading the secondary casualty report are not known. What is known is that he added them, closed the record, and has not been assigned to a denial operation since. Intelligence work does not produce clean outcomes. It produces managed ones, situations made temporarily more controllable at a cost that is sometimes understood immediately and sometimes not for years. This operation is documented here not as a success or a failure. It is documented as a decision tree made by human beings with incomplete information under institutional pressure inside a window that kept narrowing. The questions it raises about what precision actually costs and what it leaves behind are not questions with simple answers. If you want to understand how these decisions are made, how they compound, and what they set in motion that nobody planned for, that is what this channel documents. Subscribe. The next operation is already in the record. Somewhere, a file has already been opened, and somewhere in that file, there is a gap that nobody has explained yet.